It all started last summer, during one of those long, quiet afternoons. The kind that stretches endlessly with the oppressive heat and silence. Mom and Dad had gone away for the weekend. A much-needed break, they called it. I didn't mind. It wasn't the first time they'd taken off, leaving the house in our hands. But something was different this time. Something in the air. My stepbrother, Alex, had been living with us for about a year by then. We weren't close growing up. His mom had passed away when he was little, and Dad had remarried my mom a few years ago. It wasn't like we had any bad blood between us. We just weren't the kind of siblings who shared things. Until that weekend. With Mom and Dad away, the house was strangely quiet. Too quiet. The first night passed uneventfully. I stayed in my room, binging on my favorite shows, while Alex kept mostly to himself. By the next afternoon, boredom set in, and I found myself in the kitchen, pouring a glass of iced tea when Alex walked in. "Bored yet?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. A little, I admitted, taking a sip. We hadn't spoken much in the past few weeks, busy with our separate lives. But something about being alone together in that big, empty house felt different. There was an unspoken tension, a kind of awkwardness that I couldn't quite place. "I've got an idea," he said, walking over to the fridge and pulling out a bottle of soda. "Ever played Truth or Dare?" I laughed. "We're not 12, Alex." "Exactly," he said, grinning mischievously. "That's what makes it interesting." I rolled my eyes but agreed. Mostly out of boredom. We settled in the living room, and the game started out innocently enough. Silly dares like running around the yard or answering embarrassing questions about crushes from our past. But as the hours went by, the questions started to dig deeper and the dares became bolder. The tension in the room thickened, but neither of us acknowledged it. "What's the most awkward thing you've ever done around me?" Alex asked at one point, his tone casual. But there was something in his eyes that made me pause. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "I don't know. Probably that time I walked in on you in the bathroom by accident." We both laughed, but the laughter quickly faded into another stretch of silence. Alex leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "Truth or dare?" I hesitated for a moment, then said, "Truth." There was a glint in his eyes as he asked, "Do you think things would have been different between us if we hadn't become step-siblings?" That question hung in the air, heavy with implications neither of us had ever dared to address before. I stared at him, the weight of his question settling between us like a brick wall. Did he really ask that? Was I imagining the shift in his voice? My heart raced, and I tried to come up with an answer that didn't give away too much, didn't cross any lines. But what lines? We weren't related by blood, after all. "That's a weird question," I said, trying to laugh it off. But my voice sounded shaky, even to me. "I mean, we're family now." "Yeah, family," Alex repeated, leaning back on the couch, his eyes never leaving mine. "But we weren't always." His words hung there, challenging me to face the truth that had always lingered in the background. Before our parents got married, Alex wasn't my stepbrother. He was just a guy I saw occasionally at family functions, someone I barely knew, but always found myself looking at a little too long. But now, the title of step-siblings felt like a boundary neither of us was supposed to cross. Except sitting there in that empty house, it was starting to feel like the boundary was fading. "I don't know," I finally answered, trying to keep my tone light. "Things would be different, I guess, but who knows how." The words felt like a cop-out, but I wasn't sure how else to respond. Alex didn't push it, though. Instead, he stood up suddenly and stretched. "I'm gonna grab another drink, want one?" "Sure," I said, grateful for the distraction. As he walked into the kitchen, I sat there replaying the conversation in my head. What was he trying to get at? Was it just the boredom? Or had he been thinking about this for a while? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between us, something neither of us had fully acknowledged yet. When Alex came back, he handed me a soda and sat down a little closer this time. "Let's change the game," he said, his voice casual, but still holding that edge of seriousness. "What do you mean? Forget truth or dare. Let's just be honest for a minute. No games, no dares. Just say what's on your mind." I swallowed, feeling the tension rise again. I wasn't sure if I liked this new version of the game, but part of me was curious, maybe too curious. "Okay," I said, setting my drink down. You go first. Alex hesitated, running a hand through his hair. All right, I'll say it. Sometimes I wonder what things would be like if we weren't family, if we hadn't been thrown together because of our parents. My heart skipped a beat. He was really saying it out loud now, the thing that had been sitting between us since the day our parents got married. I wasn't sure how to respond. Was he just testing the waters, or did he actually mean it? I bit my lip, my mind racing. Do you think about that a lot? More than I probably should, he admitted, his eyes meeting mine. What about you? I looked away, suddenly feeling exposed. I mean, it's crossed my mind, I said quietly, barely above a whisper. I could feel his gaze on me, but I didn't dare look at him. But we're family now, it's complicated. Yeah, Alex said, his voice softer now. It is complicated. We sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Neither of us moved, but the space between us felt like it was shrinking. And then, as if on cue, the sky outside darkened, and the first crack of thunder echoed in the distance. A storm was coming. The thunder rumbled again, louder this time, shaking the windows and punctuating the heavy atmosphere in the room. I glanced at Alex, who looked just as startled as I felt. It was as if the storm outside mirrored the brewing tension between us. Looks like we're in for a wild night, he said, trying to break the ice with a half-hearted smile. Yeah, wild, I echoed, though my heart wasn't in it. I wanted to change the subject, to avoid where this conversation was heading, but something compelled me to stay in the moment, to explore the boundaries we were both edging closer to. Do you think Mom and Dad will be okay out there? I asked, trying to shift the focus to something safer. I'm sure they'll be fine, Alex replied, though his eyes didn't leave mine. They're used to storms. It's us I'm worried about. Us? I questioned, my voice rising slightly. What do you mean by that? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I just mean if they knew what we were talking about, what we were feeling. I interrupted him, my heart racing. They wouldn't understand. They'd think we're crazy. Maybe, but maybe they'd be curious too, he said, his tone teasing yet serious. Maybe they'd remember what it was like before they settled into their perfect lives. A flash of lightning lit up the room, illuminating the tension in his expression. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The combination of the storm outside and the electric atmosphere between us felt too potent to ignore. What if we just let it go, I proposed almost impulsively. What if we explore what we're feeling instead of running from it? He looked taken aback for a second, then a slow smile crept across his face. Are you serious? Because that would definitely be crossing some lines. I know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But aren't we already? He paused, the air thick with unspoken words and possibilities. You're right, we are. But what does that even mean for us? Before I could answer, the storm unleashed its fury outside. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled. For a moment, the sound swallowed our words, leaving only the beating of my heart in my ears. I guess we could just see where it goes, Alex suggested, his eyes searching mine, both hesitant and hopeful. My breath hitched. It felt like a leap of faith, one I'd never imagined I'd take. Okay, but we have to be careful. We can't let it get out of hand, he nodded, the seriousness of the moment settling back around us. Deal. We'll just talk about everything. For the next few minutes we exchanged stories, things we had never shared before. We talked about our childhoods, the struggles we faced fitting into each other's families, and the silent expectations we felt from our parents. Each revelation felt like peeling back a layer, exposing deeper emotions we had buried for too long. What do we do now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Let's just breathe, Alex suggested, letting go of my hand. We don't have to have all the answers right now. The moment hung in the air, charged with possibilities and unspoken truths. I nodded, feeling both relieved and disappointed. Perhaps it was better this way, to take a step back and acknowledge the complexity of our situation. As the storm began to subside outside, I realized that our conversation had opened up something we couldn't close again. We were forever changed by this night, by the connection that had blossomed in the chaos. We'll figure it out, I said, meeting his gaze again. Together. Yeah, Alex replied, a small smile breaking through the tension. Together. In that moment, I knew our journey was just beginning, a new chapter waiting to unfold. And as the rain trickled down the windows, I felt a sense of hope, ready to face whatever came next.